Hey, this is Jacob Baadsgaard. I'm the CEO and founder of Disruptive Advertising. Today we're going to talk about how you can stop punishing your top performers and have a line of people wanting to work at your company. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to be taking an insider look at why hiring inexperienced people and giving away a chunk of your profits might actually be good for your business. If you're a new listener, new visitor to the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, and we're also extremely grateful to Inc.com for making us the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And if you're on iTunes right now, get there, do it. We really need your help. Thank you. All right, let's strip it down, dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, entrepreneur, or leader in any capacity, you know that culture, and rather having a good culture, is one thing that's just vital today in having a healthy and a profitable organization. But is it possible to build a great culture without going bankrupt in the process? And to have that culture not only be good, but actually help you put you on top. Well, stay tuned, because our guest today is Jacob Baadsgaard, and you cannot spell it the way it sounds. He is the CEO and founder of Disruptive Advertising, a tech-enabled agency that specializes in helping companies advertise profitably on Google and Facebook. And you think, why have we got a marketing company? Well, you will be surprised, I promise you. In 4 short years, Disruptive made it to the Inc. 500. This year, actually back in 2017, it made it to number 145 on the Inc. 500. And has achieved this with zero debt or funding. Jacob's primary personal and professional passion revolves around investing in relationships, as is evidenced by being voted as one of the top places to work 2 consecutive years. He's also a regular contributor to sites like Forbes and Entrepreneur and many others. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Jacob Baadsgaard!
Yeah! That's right.
Good to have you here, mate.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. You know, right at the front end there, I opened up by saying something that you are doing that is dramatically different. And that is, I want to just go to that first. You are hiring inexperienced people over experienced people. Every CEO, every HR person in the world is going, screaming in fits of, oh my God, what is this guy doing? He's going to go bankrupt trying to train these people. How are you doing it?
Well, I mean, there's a few things that go into the why we're doing that as well.
Of course.
And then we can jump into the how.
Yeah, please, let's get into the why.
We probably, for every 1 experienced person that we hire, we probably hire about 8 inexperienced people.
Wow.
And so we've got a pretty skewed ratio there. And the reason why I like to do that is a lot of the times what I've found is that when I hire inexperienced people, they're very moldable, hungry, and humble, and ready to do things the right way as long as they're shown the path. Mm-hmm. When we hire experienced people, oftentimes there's a lot of additional pressure making the relationship work and making it work relatively fast, because that experienced person comes with a significantly higher price tag and oftentimes habits that are much harder to break in terms of how they're approaching things.
Mm-hmm. So is it, to use Richard Branson's words, the virgin mentality, that you like people who are coming in who have not got all the baggage, who are really sort of sponges for what it is you're teaching?
Well, absolutely. And what I've actually found is that once we get those fresh people up to a good point where they are solid individual contributors in the company, that it's actually a much more profitable endeavor to amplify their abilities through junior resources rather than just hiring more and more experienced people that still have a plateau. They can only contribute so much.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, it's so contradictory to what everybody tells us. I mean, you got to hire the best people. You got to hire the most experienced people. You got to be willing to pay more to have those people. So I'm wondering, how did you get to that? Because everything in business says the other way. I mean, I love that you're doing it, don't get me wrong, and what you're doing is obviously working, but how did you get to it? Were you just like, well, we don't have any money, so we'll hire inexperienced people? I mean, what was it?
That's definitely was a contributing part to that, right?
Sure.
In terms of you hire who you can afford sometimes as well. And what we found is, and we're not hiring people with zero experience. These are typically college grads with some working experience. And so they've got something to contribute out of the gate. But yeah, they're still pretty green. They're still pretty fresh. And, there's a few things. One is from a price point. When you're a new company that is not funded, you've kind of got to get what you can.
Right.
And the other thing that I've realized is it actually kind of reminds me of the moment that I had in my career that led me to start this business, is why I've built things the way that I have. And that is, I was in a consulting group of about 250 people.
Right.
And in our annual review, I was the top performer in the entire group. And I remember sitting down with my manager, reviewing my performance for the last year, and him saying, "Hey, Jacob, guess what? I have got some good news for you. You performed so well last year, I'm going to give you a 9% raise to your salary." And I remember thinking in my mind, okay, I upsold. I was a consultant. It was all billable time, right? A couple $1 million worth of my time, and upsold about $4 or $5 million worth of contracts in software sales as well. And I thought 9% for me at the time, that was not a lot of money.
No.
I was still only 3.5, 4 years out of college myself. And so I thought, man, this is crazy. It doesn't matter if I perform here, I'm going to get compensated here. And if I perform way up here, I'm still going to get compensated right here.
Right.
And so that was kind of my moment when I realized, A, going the corporate ladder was not for me,
Right.
but B, that I wanted to go and create a system where I didn't just put a ceiling on people, where they could perform at the level and the speed that they wanted to, and that they would get compensated accordingly. What's actually surprising is that people that I hire that are inexperienced, fresh, and new are typically paid more than their peer set with 5 more years of experience than them within the first 18 months to 2 years of working at disruptive advertising.
That's wild.
So it's just, hey, let's take the ceilings off. Let's go. Let's make this happen. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And it works because it's exactly what I would have wanted. Mm-hmm. And that's why I've built my business that way.
Do you think that's the main factor of why you were voted as the top place to work for 2 years in a row?
That is the number one positive feedback we receive from our employees, is that they get what they put in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard filter, because it's kind of like, again, looking at it from the outside, I'm not inside, and I realize it's different on the inside, so I'm not in any way pretending I understand. But on the outside, it can look like a boiler room situation, meaning that, if I'm a hard salesperson and I'm cranking out the numbers, then I'm going to get paid big money. But some would say that potentially has an impact on the moral dilemmas around producing. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that
and I know you're not about that, so that's why I'm asking that question.
Yes, well, and I think that's a good topic for us to jump into.
Yeah.
And that a lot of what we build around is very objective. And that's one of the things that's very frustrating as a leader when you have to judge people based on things that are very subjective. You kind of put yourself in between a rock and a hard place, because no matter what you do, you don't really know if it's the right thing, the right person to promote, the right person to give the raise. You're kind of just going with what you feel is right. And so our career path and ability to grow is about 80 to 90% objective, with about a 10 to 20% subjective component to just make sure, hey, yeah, you checked that box, but did that translate into something that is effective and productive and profitable for our clients, and for the business as well? And so there are a couple of fail checks there to make sure that isn't happening, but the vast majority of it is objective. And what I've found is you put the carrot in front of me and tell me exactly what I need to make happen, I make it happen. And what you've just described is very, very common in the sales environment that is very commission heavy, very performance heavy, which I agree with. And I've got a very high performing sales team. However, I think that those components should exist in most positions in a company, if not all of them. There are still a couple that I've struggled to completely nail that down for. But all positions in the company have, as a percentage of base salary, have the opportunity to do much better than their based on their performance.
So, okay, so we know that the positive feedback comes that people can get paid in direct alignment with what it is that they actually produce. Yes. What I know that you've got some other things in there. Can you guide our viewers and our listeners around some of the central principles that have allowed you guys to have the meteoric growth to become a top place to work? I mean, particularly at that cultural level. What are some of the principles in there that our listeners can go, oh, maybe I should try that?
Okay, absolutely. And here's the number one thing. The principle is don't penalize your top performers for being awesome. And in many environments, we do that, and we do so unintentionally. In the consulting worlds, in the retainer worlds, in the project-based worlds, where, hey, you need to invest X amount of time into this project. When the reality is someone that's awesome at what they do can get it done in a third as much time, and why should they not get full credit for getting something done in that amount of time? And so the first thing that I would say is stop penalizing your top performers, because it hurts everybody. And the way that we've done that is we've really just chunked out the business in terms of what costs do we have, and as a percentage of revenue, what can we afford to pay this cost in the business? And so certain fulfillment positions or sales positions or marketing or whatever that is, we've simply identified what percentage are we operating within? What's the max that we can go to pay for this role in the company as a whole? And once we do that, then we can identify the efficiencies that come around that. So as people perform at higher levels, rather than hiring another person, their production makes it so we don't have to, and that money can flow through to them now.
Yeah, I mean, in our previous conversation, one of the things that was clear to me is how you seem to have approached this whole thing in a very different way. I mean, like I said in the beginning, your company's not been a penny in debt. You month to month been more and more profitable. You've grown without venture capital. Tell us about why that was, because I mean, with the amount of growth you've had, I would imagine you've actually had people coming in today's world coming at you and saying, "Oh, well, let's throw $1 million at this," or whatever it might be, and yet you've not taken that on. You've not gone into debt, and you've grown in profit. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, it was, it's kind of a conflicted journey. I think most entrepreneurs really struggle to know, do I want to grow this to sell it? Do I want to raise money to grow it faster to make these things happen? And at the end of the day, after really not knowing a lot of the answers to these questions, because we're in the benefit of now 4.5 years into it, and we've
Sure.
learned a lot of lessons. I didn't know for the first while what I wanted to do. But what I do know is that every time I was approached about an investor, we've had several potential acquirers, a lot of these things coming at me as we've grown with good margin, without debt, and without raising capital, you're quite appealing in that situation. Sure. And so
the venture capitalist dream.
Yeah. and so the first thing was I just had to decide what I wanted.
Right.
And that really is what it comes down to. And the reality is I'm in this for the long haul. I love the people that I work with. I love what we do. And I think that the biggest reason is because we choose. And we choose what we do. We choose who we work with. We choose these types of things. And we kind of lose that ability when you take on investors, when you take on debt, because now it's not about what you choose to do. It's about what you have to do to meet your obligations. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's kind of really the big thing for me, was just choosing, what do I want from this? And at the end of the day, I love this. I'm in it for the long haul. And it's really influenced the decisions, the compensation plans, the leadership style, is really just deciding what we want.
So talk to us about that. Let's talk to us about the leadership style. How is the leadership style at Disruptive Advertising different than what you see as traditional, or what you see even at a peer level of competitor?
Yeah, it's, I could tell you probably more things that have not worked on the leadership side.
Sure, that's important too.
And there's a few things that have worked really well as well, mm-hmm. and a lot of those intertwine.
Yeah.
And now this type of environment that is fast growing is not for everybody. It's truly not. And so our leadership style and some of the decisions that we make don't work for everybody. And we do have a healthy amount of people that doesn't fit for, that we do end up moving on from. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know if it's more or less than average from our peer set, but like I said, there's some pros and cons. I'm a big believer in creating an opportunity of growth that you put a person into and really allow them the opportunity to grow, rather than force that growth upon them or to try and do it for them. And it's all related to the comp plan, and it's all related to our mission statement as a company, mm-hmm. which is to improve lives through results-based relationships.
Right.
And so the structure that we've put in place from a leadership standpoint is it's exactly laid out in terms of how you can grow within the company. And then just once a month, we're sitting down and saying, how are we progressing on this? And what barriers can we take down for you? And so we're not overly involved in terms of, we kind of want people to be self-motivated and to go get after it. But we've taken the time and invested the resources as well to develop training programs that people can go through as quickly as they want to, a compensation and performance plan that they can progress into as fast as they want to. And what's really interesting is that when I see my neighbor progressing and doing really well within the company, I'm not sitting back and being number two to anybody. Mm-hmm. And so there's just this mojo in the office that everyone's doing it. And so no one wants to be that person being left behind.
Right.
So we've just created the framework and everyone's just running.
It's very cool. And part of your philosophy has been about reinvesting profits back into employees. I know you've done that with community too, but I want to talk about with employees. Is that through the training programs, or is that something else altogether?
Well, that actually takes us back to that percentage of cost into revenue.
Right.
And so the efficiencies that they give the company, they actually get the lion's share of the additional profit that it creates for the business.
Tell us how that works, because that sounds like, what?
Right. So one of the things as a percentage of total revenue that I take very seriously is making sure that we hit our desired profit margin.
Sure.
When other people contribute and invest in a way where they're now operating at substantially a lower cost than we would need them to in that position, they get about 60 to 70% of the cost savings that they provide to the company.
Wow.
And so and again, I'm still winning because they're operating within their constraint of total cost to revenue. And so it's a win for the company. Profits still go up. But what happens is all of a sudden I end up with a bunch of people in my company that are very desirable in the marketplace that get recruited all of the time. And they get offers that are less than they're already making to more boring jobs that they don't want to do.
That's pretty
And
cool.
so the people that are performing very well, it's sticky. They don't want to leave, right?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing because, I mean, you and I discussed this a little bit in our previous conversation. You know, in my last book, Fiercely Loyal, one of the things I talked about was millennials sticking around in jobs for, on average, about 1.2 years, right? And changing careers every 4 years. Your people are sticking.
Yes, the ones that we want to are definitely sticking around.
Right. So let's go to the other side of it, which I touched on in my previous question, which is investment in community. Tell us about that. Because, again, one of the things I wrote about in my book was the 4 C's, and one of those was community, that you have to be committed to community, but it's extraordinarily rare. So I'm always very interested when I meet a leader who has a company that's part of their commitment. Tell us a little bit about that, would you, Jake?
You bet. And I have to give a little bit of credit to my family and the culture that I have grown up in.
Sure.
I'm religious, and it's part of our religion and culture to we actually donate 10% of our gross earnings. And so so I've grown up with that. And then as a business, at the end of the day, we want to drive profit, but for what, right? And I'm the guy that wants my cake and I want to eat it too. I want to do fun things and I want to enjoy life and I want a nice lifestyle. But I also see enough hardships and things that are going on that I want to be able to contribute to that as well. And so what we've done at Disruptive Advertising, and I think this is one of the big draws and retaining aspects of Disruptive, is we've created a charity committee where twice a month a survey is sent to the entire company that says, who is someone that you know that could use a hand? And that doesn't always just mean a check. Oftentimes it's making some financial donation, but that might be our time. That might be our resources. Sometimes we run ads or create things for people and we pay for it so that they can get more business and get their business off the ground. We do a lot of that. And we've actually got a committee that reviews all of those. We have a budget that's somewhat flexible. So anytime they have a good reason for us to do more, I usually say yes. And, I just look at, there's quite a few situations, and obviously with December not too far behind us, quite a few mortgages that we were able to make that payment for them that month. Or, I've got about 100 employees now, and by the amount of families and people that touches, there's always someone that is suffering or dying from cancer. There is always someone that's lost a loved one. A tragic accident. One of our clients was shot and killed in a cafe in Panama last month. And so it's crazy that, 100 people here, we're touching, I think I did the math, it's about 5,000 lives that we have a very close pulse on. And every month we've got anywhere from 3 to 5 projects that we're doing to kind of help in some small way to do that. And so when we have our monthly company meeting that says, hey, and guess what? We had a great month. And guess what we did with some of that great month? And this is what you're contributing to by being here. And the person that submits the charity idea is the one that champions and runs with that project. It's not done for them. We just put the resources behind it.
I imagine, again, part of my last book was talking about how millennials want to be associated to something that is bigger than themselves, to be part of something bigger. I imagine, you've got this compensation pen, which is not the highest thing on their radar, but it's on their radar. But you've got this community thing, you've got community investment, you've got opportunities for growth and development. I'm thinking that you're not struggling for people to come in the door.
Not at all. We've probably got over 100 applicants right now for the open positions that we have.
And you've got 100 employees.
Yes.
So you've got a 1-to-1 ratio of people waiting to come in for people sitting there, which is also a good way to make sure that people are on their toes.
Yeah. And guess what?
Down? We got a
lineup. and the great thing is, we don't have to pay for a recruiter.
No. Well, this is one of the things I've said for years, that your culture is your best recruiter or your worst, depending on the company itself and how it works. But, that's fantastic. Your company is, it says it right there on your shirt, which I think is pretty cool too. It says results-based relationships. Tell us what that means, because, we get results, we get relationships. Putting the two things together seems like, well, relationships is warm and fuzzy, and results is bottom line. Help us understand how that works.
You bet. This all stems from my first client as an independent. It was that I was married at a young age. I had a daughter, and I was going through college, and I didn't have the luxury of just going to college. I worked full time and still got my degree in 3 years, and it was very stressful. But my first client as an independent actually was my employer while I was in college, and I had reached back out to him when I went independent. They were about a 25-person shop that provided tech support services. And so I jumped in, and with the skill set that I and my organization now has, which is using analytics to drive growth through advertising on Google and Facebook, we were able to take them from about a 25-person shop that was handling about 200 tech support related leads a day to over 3,000 requests a day. They went to about 350 employees. They actually did choose to go the raising capital round. I believe they raised about $18 million in that time period. And that's a relationship that isn't going anywhere because we put results first in that relationship. And it was really awesome for me to see the impact that I could have. And then guess what he did for me? He catapulted up my business.
Of course.
Right? That's a relationship that was based on results. And then one other one that it's actually a pretty sensitive topic to me is my first job out of college. I felt like a fraud and a failure because the person that was training me and I didn't really connect, and some of the principles weren't clicking in my brain, and I would ask questions, and I was kind of made to feel like an idiot when I had to ask a question again to understand a principle. And a guy by the name of Jeff came. He wasn't on my team, had no reason to care other than he was just a good guy, came by one time and said, "Hey, Jacob, how are you doing?" And I said, I'm fine, because that's what we all say.
Of course.
He said, "Bullshit. You're not fine. I can tell."
Sure. Fabulous.
And he sat down next to me. And for the next about 2 months, he spent 1 to 2 hours every single day with no benefit to him financially, answered my questions, held me accountable, didn't let me get away with not putting in the work. And in that time period, completely changed my level of confidence about myself, about my trajectory, about my future. And I went from thinking I'm a fraud and I don't even know if I should be here to being a top performer in that organization in the first 6 months of being there. And so when I say results-based relationships, when you put results first in doing things for people, you build a real relationship that will last a lifetime. And the opposite of that is when you rely on a relationship to get away with something that you shouldn't be getting away with. Whether that be I'm being lazy at work, or I'm being a crappy husband or father or friend. But hey, because we have a relationship, you're going to let me get away with that. And that is the opposite of what we're about here. And that's why we say results-based relationships and put it in that order.
I love it. And you've even developed a system to actually ensure that you're at the top of the game in each of your relationships, right? Tell us a little bit about that for those who are now going, okay, what is this? Tell us how you developed this system.
You bet. So it's tricky. We all have way more relationships than we have the ability to keep track of in our brains,
of course,
and make sure that we're investing in the way that we need to. And so I do most of my things in Excel. And so what I've done is I simply have an Excel sheet with a couple of different tabs. One of them is for my immediate family, which is my wife and my 3 daughters, right? The next one is for our extended family, which are our parents, siblings. I come from a family of 10 siblings, and my wife comes from a family of 9 siblings.
Wow.
Almost all of them are married, and I think that nieces and nephews were over 50 now.
Oh.
So it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And then I have my work.
There's a lot of birthday presents.
Yeah, it is. Then I've got work, which we've got about 100 people there.
Right.
And then I've got my friends that are not family, but just friends. And I simply have it like this, as I just say, this is the name. And then I've just got a couple of data elements that I'm keeping track of. When's the last time I talked to this person? What's the last meaningful thing I've done for this relationship? And I just put dates next to each of them with a little note, and that's it.
Wow.
And then I can scan through the list and say, oh my gosh, I haven't talked to my brother in like 3 months. And so I can shoot him a quick call on my way home from work, or I can send him a quick text that just says I'm grateful for him. And what's great about that is it just allows me to stay on top of those relationships, because I know that I'm more of a whole person when I take the time to do that. And even though we've still got we've got a 100-person organization now, I still do a one-on-one with everyone in the company at least once or twice a year, because I just want to know how they're doing and what's working and what's not, and things about them personally as well. And then we've also got a lot of things that aren't published in our company, but when major life events happen that are good or not necessarily good, we actually have a budget set aside for that as well, where the business can jump in and contribute. Hey, you just bought your first house. Furniture is expensive. Let's chip in a couple grand to help you with that. You just had your first baby. Hey, let's chip in. It's a stressful time. Let's give you enough to cover the premium on your insurance, so that's one less thing you have to worry about. Those are the kind of things that we like to do, and that I've been empowering my leaders, because that's a baton that I've had to start passing off to other leaders in the organization, because it's becoming harder and harder for me to do that on a one-to-one basis for everyone in the company now.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk, VaynerMedia now is at like 800 people or something. And he had the same problem. I mean, he loves to be one-on-one with people, and got to a place where he's like, it's not possible anymore.
Yeah.
And if you are the central person who does that, and it becomes you, then it falls apart pretty fast when you can't reach everybody. And yes. I love that you're passing that baton on to your leaders. I mean, Gary did that with Claude Silver, who he made his chief heart officer. She was a guest on the show. She's wonderful. But that was the whole principle, is like real connection with your people. And it's sad because there are so few companies who actually get it that you guys are anomalies. I think it should be the other way. I mean, I hope it will become that way, but it's, I love that you're passing that baton on, that you're willing to do that. That to me is amazing. Now, clearly you are one of the good guys, and I don't say that by blowing smoke. I don't blow smoke, as I'm sure you gathered from our previous conversation. I don't blow smoke up anybody's skirt, but you're clearly one of the good guys. But oftentimes, I think leaders get confused between being a good guy versus being a nice guy. And yes. There was a time when you were focused on being a nice guy, and that maybe wasn't to your benefit. Tell us a little bit about that so people can get that distinction nice and clear.
I still have not completely figured this out, but I have lots of examples in terms of what I've learned along the way. It is a challenge as a leader to have the courage and the confidence to hold people accountable. Mm-hmm. And there is a mind shift that has to occur where I really have to believe that holding someone accountable is the nicest, best thing that I can do for that person. And as a younger leader, that is something that I have really struggled with, that I thought I was making some progress on, and found myself making a lot of the same mistakes even the last couple of months.
Sure.
And so let me tell you about one positive experience that I had. And it was actually at the beginning of last year, and turned into something that was much better than expected. I remember sitting down with one of my more senior people in the company and having to sit across the table from them and tell them, in very few words, hey, I'm paying you way more than you're worth to the company. You've had plenty of time to get where you need to be, and you're not there.
Right.
And I realized that I had kind of dropped the ball in not having this accountability conversation earlier. But now that hey, we're here, you're not worth what we're paying you. But I believe that you are the right person to see this through and to make it happen. And so here's exactly where I need us to be from a revenue standpoint in this category at the end of Q1, Q2, Q3, or Q4. Mm-hmm. I want to work with you, and I'm committed to this relationship. So I hope that you are as well. But what I have to do is that at the end of each quarter, we have to reevaluate. And if we're not on progress to be where we need to be, I have to right-size your compensation at that time point. And I don't want to do that, but I have to do what's best for the business first. And I actually think this is what's best for you and what's best for me as well. And so as you can imagine, that was a really hard conversation, and a conversation that most leaders are not willing to have.
Well, I think that because most leaders go to black and white. Yes. You're great, you're fabulous, we'll keep paying you, this is terrific. Or you've started to decline and we're just going to remove you because I've talked about this before on the show. Jack Welch, it was the manager for General Electric, for GE, came up through the ranks and had a philosophy that I totally disagreed with, totally and absolutely, which was about, constantly firing the bottom 20%, and he was harsh. And then I saw him speak at the World Business Conference in New York about 5-6 years ago, and he shifted dramatically and talked about the generosity gene and talked about how nobody should be fired and be surprised, that you should confront them, sit with them and say, what do you need? What are the resources that we can offer you to train you, to coach you, to develop you? He goes, and at the end of that time, if you've done that, they'll come to you and say, I know, I'm out. And that seems to me very much what you've done is, so I said good guy, not nice guy, because I see a massive distinction. And I think that nice guys are not good. My language, definitely not yours, but I think nice guys are assholes. I know, because I was one. I was definitely an asshole because I would try and be encouraging and I would try and do these things, but I was ignoring the fact that what that person needed was not what I was offering. And oftentimes, and I know because I did it in relationships that I was in too, all right, I've said, I've broken up with somebody who said, you know what, I've been an asshole because I knew this was done ages ago and I kept waiting for you to change instead of saying, this is not a good fit. And I think it's the same in a romantic relationship, in a friendship, and in business, right?
It is.
And I just love that you're willing to do that, Jake. I just love that you step into that. And I also love that you own that stepping into it is not easy. Because I think that people think that's there's a certain kind of leader and that's easy for them. No. If you are a decent human being, that conversation will never be easy.
Well, I got to tell you, this is a lesson I had to learn the hard way. Because I had a senior person earlier on in the business that I was not having these types of conversations with when I needed to be having these types of conversations with them. And ultimately that led to expectations that were not being met. And I actually had to deal with a lawsuit as a result of that. And, it was pretty frivolous and thrown out pretty quickly, but still a gut-wrenching, expensive, really painful lesson that was learned. And that's what kind of burned it into my soul. But what I've also learned is that it's like exercise. When you're on it, it feels good and you're making it happen, but it doesn't take much to fall back into being the nice guy again.
That's it.
And it is, you got to be on top of that. And what I've seen is that I go through cycles of sometimes I just want to keep people happy rather than doing what's right.
Yeah. And
I totally fall right into that asshole category again.
Yeah.
And because it's not what's best for them, it's not what's best for me. And I just, I'm just screwing everybody when I do that. And I think and I'm playing it off because I'm the nice guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's total bullshit.
Yeah. And I will own it, and I've called people out on it, and I said, if you want to know what a nice guy really is, they're an ego fucking maniac.
Yes.
Because it's egoic. It's totally egoic. It's all about me and me looking good. That's why I'm going to be the nice guy. And if you put your ego to the side and say, hold on a second, am I really serving this person? Well, the ego says, well, you don't want to seem like the bad guy and have them struggle for the rent. I am not helping them. I would, and that's why I love what Tony Hsieh did. I'll pay you $5,000 to leave.
Yeah.
I will help you. I will coach you. I'll put you with our coach and have you go somewhere else where you're better served. Like, this is the piece that in our work that we do with companies is saying, if you can put the humanity at the top of the list, HR has always been the ugly stepchild of the C-suite.
Yeah.
And it needs to be at the top, but not HR as we know it. Because HR as we know it is really a way to avoid legal. But real HR, which is caring about the humans, is vastly different. And I just love that you're running a business on that and clearly demonstrating, and I just love it, demonstrating that it is not only practical, it's profitable. It actually works, right? So,
yes.
So when people come back with me and they say, but that, we have to concern ourselves with the bottom line, I'm going to send them to talk to you.
All right, let's do it.
Because that's the thing. Now, shifting over to business, like I said, you're an advertising company doing something different. You've developed a software that has audited over 4,000 businesses, I think it is, about their Google AdWords and Facebook ad accounts. And you came up with I believe the numbers are still right, 76% of people's budget for those things is wasted.
Yes.
So, first of all, how did you come to develop that software? And second of all, what are some of the common mistakes people are making that we can put the brakes on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's mind-numbing how much of the budgets that are going into Google and Facebook are just wasted.
Right.
What we've found there is simplistically what our business is based on is using analytics to make smart marketing decisions.
Right.
That's what I did the first few years of being a consultant at Omniture, which was later acquired by Adobe. And just making sure, look, you need to see what you're spending in marketing and what it's producing on the other side. And too often that visibility isn't even there to begin with. And so we're just looking at, hey, is revenue up or down? And we're going to decide what credit we want to give to marketing. And so with Google and Facebook, as you can imagine, it's very trackable. That's why I've chosen to specialize in those areas.
Right.
And because it's very trackable, we can actually see what is this turning into for our clients. We can measure profitability, total revenue. And there's a few things that I see where people are just completely missing the boat. Number one is they're just spreading their budgets way too thin across way too many audiences, keywords, whatever that might be. And what's interesting is that the way that budgets are assigned in these platforms is once the budget's used for the day, guess what? It all turns off.
Right.
That means the good stuff turned off. That means the bad stuff turned off.
Right.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
And so our software is able to identify which areas are performing best and completely capitalizing on that market segment before we spend money anywhere else. So that's the first thing that we do is you don't even have to spend a dime more, and you can typically get 2 to 3 times the output from your campaigns within the same budget that you're already operating.
When we talked last time, I found that fascinating. So the company that's spending, just use a silly number, but that's spending $100, you're not asking them to spend another 100. They say the same $100, but with far greater responses. That is quite fascinating. And I think that a lot of companies are reasonably sophisticated. They are looking at the analytics, but what are they missing? It seems like they're missing something, Jake, that you and your company are clearly seeing that seems like it should be glaring.
Yeah, they're typically looking at the analytics, but they're looking at the wrong analytics.
Okay.
So the first thing is, like I said, that they're spreading themselves way too thin and not really getting out of the budget what they should be getting. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that I've noticed that businesses are just not paying attention to at the level or detail that they should be is lifetime value of a customer compared to acquisition cost.
Right.
And so very, very commonly, companies will advertise for a cost per conversion on Google or Facebook, when the reality is the right customer, generally speaking, 80% of the profits come from 20% of your customers.
Of course.
So why don't we try and get more of the 20%, right? That's not typically what's happening. And so what we do is we identify which are the ones that are actually contributing to a higher customer lifetime value, and then aligning the marketing behind that. But guess what? Very often, it's very, very common for that right customer to cost a little bit more. And that's why it kept getting cut out. Hey, we looked at the analytics and this isn't performing as well because they were just looking at it from a cost per conversion, a form fill, or the first purchase on an e-commerce site. They weren't looking at how much was that customer worth to us over time. And let's get more of those, because even if we had to pay 5 times the rate to get that customer, totally worth it.
So if, again, silly numbers, but people are looking at, well, it costs us $1 for every acquisition, as opposed to this particular segment costs us $5 per acquisition, but they bring us $50 in. The ones that were costing us $1, they bring us in about $12 or whatever the number might be.
Exactly. That's spot on.
Right. Again, I don't claim to be a great business head by any stroke of the imagination, but it seems like that's should be obvious.
That's what you would think. And that's the part that, hey, you know what? I guess I'm glad it's not obvious to everyone, because that's why our business is flourishing. And
maybe you should call your company Obvious Advertising.
That's
Disruptively Obvious Advertising.
Disruptively Obvious. All right, we've got a new one.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? It's fascinating. But, it's still old school advertising, I don't think people ever knew the return on their investment, because, they were on billboards, you drive by and you kind of figured you got visibility. Now all that's nonsense. We know that's nonsense. It's gone away. Now there's trackability, and that's why I find it fascinating, because you can track in new media. And so it's really very interesting to me. We got to sort of move towards the end of the show here, but I want to ask you about, when it comes to leadership, who is a leader that you see who is just doing it right, outside of, I don't know, some guy called Jake? He's run some marketing advertising company.
Oh man, there are, there's a lot of leaders and mentors that I've had throughout the years. And, I guess I'm probably going to put a plug in for an organization where I've just gotten tremendous value from. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the Entrepreneurs Organization?
Of course.
And so I've been a member for about 3 years now. And, one of the things that I've absolutely loved about being a part of that organization is I'm a part of a group of about 8 business owners, entrepreneurs, and we get together once a month. We've got a confidentiality agreement between all of us, and we really dive in to each other's businesses, personal, family lives, and we talk about the 5% of the best that's happening that we don't feel comfortable sharing with everyone else, and the 5% of the worst that's happening that we don't feel comfortable sharing with anyone else. And I've got to tell you that what I have learned from those individuals has absolutely been a game changer for me. Mm-hmm. And some of these are individuals that have had great exits or are on the upswing with their businesses, or ranchers or things that are completely different from what I do. But that group is where I've probably had the most influence over the last 3 years.
Yeah. The Entrepreneur Organization, which used to be YPO and then YEO and then YPO. I've actually spoken for both of them, and they're great groups. And I have, like I have friends inside of there who all say the same thing. And I know, because I work one-on-one with leaders like yourself, people who are in a lot of those groups, and it's one of the common questions is, who do I talk to about this? Who do I actually, because it's hard. It's hard to, you don't want to seem like a blackguard by talking about the top 5%. And who are you going to talk to about that except somebody who can really grasp it? And you don't want to talk about the bottom 5%, because then you it feels like you're whining.
Or you're going to panic people.
Or you're going to panic people. Of course, there's the other thing. And I think the other piece around it is this, the safety. Well, you talked about that confidentiality, but the safety of knowing that you're talking to somebody and you can be real. And I think that that's a sad thing that's so often missing for so many of us. Yeah. As we come to the end here, I want to ask you for a piece of guidance for our viewers and our listeners. If you could give a leader listening, watching us, some input and say, okay, here's the number one practical thing I would like for you to go do in the next maybe 24 hours, but certainly the next 5 working days to upgrade your business, to make it work, to make you a better leader. What would be that one piece of practical advice you'd give them, Jake?
I'm going to circle back to one of the topics that we already addressed today.
Sure.
And that is to have the confidence and knowledge that holding people on your team accountable is the best thing that you can do for them. And to not be the nice guy, but to be the good guy that understands what's truly best, even if it's hard. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what leaders need to be willing to do for those that they work with, is to have that level of confidence and bring that to the table when they're sitting down and saying, I want you to go to the next level. I want what's best for you. And I'm willing to commit to helping you get there. And the way that I'm going to do that is by holding you accountable to what you say you're going to do or what you need to be doing. That's what I would say is the number one thing that I see leaders that are being successful have those types of conversations. And that's a conversation that you can have today.
That's fantastic. This has been great, man. It's been a real pleasure having you here. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for all that you've shared. Thank you for what you're doing in the work world and the example you're setting. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please tell our audience where they can find out more about you, about your company, about all the things that you're doing and the resources that they can tap into.
You bet. I'm very active on LinkedIn and regularly publish articles about these types of topics. And so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Jacob Baadsgaard. There are 4 A's in Baadsgaard. I'm probably the only one there.
And like then I said, don't try and spell it how it sounds.
And as far as the business is concerned, if you're in a situation where you're trying to grow the business and you want some help really dialing in those numbers in terms of understanding what a customer is worth to you and getting the right types of customers, we specialize in helping companies grow and scale on Google and Facebook by implementing some of the practices that we talked about earlier on the show. The best way to get a hold of us would be to just go to disruptiveadvertising.com and to reach out to us. If you already are running ads on Google or Facebook, we will run a completely free audit for you with our software and get back to you with that. So we've actually set up a page for that. It's disruptiveadvertising.com/audit. And Fabulous. We would be glad to help with that.
Awesome, my man. Thank you so much again. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. I want to thank you for being on. You did a great job. It was fabulous. And I really, as always, say to you, dear listener, dear viewer, make sure you go back and listen a couple of times. I know we have podcasts in the background, but listen, take some notes, because there's been some real gems here and real ways for you to stop and pay attention to how you're running your business, because a lot of what you're doing may seem like the right thing, but when you really look at it might be something different altogether. And what Jacob has shared today is a lot of it's counterintuitive to what you were trained around. But I really want you to pay attention to that. So do that, please. And remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive, and these fast-growing companies often hit a point where they realize that they're spending a fortune training, attracting, and developing their top talent, only have them leaving them at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in training and development only to have your people leave before you've got your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside your organization by tapping into your purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. And please remember to get yourself over to the matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, You don't need the www. Just matrix.fullmontyleadership.com and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's an assessment in the 5 areas of leadership. It's absolutely free to you, value $197. Just go to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. Again, I'm your host, Dolph Barron, founder of Full Monty Leadership. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness. If you'd like me to personally help you, just reach out to me through Full Monty Leadership. I want to help you to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about having results-based relationships and how invested you truly are. Till next time, this is Dolph Barron, and I am out.